the reality is there is so much that needs to be done, and most of it starts with us.
As an artist, if there's, I will say this and I will continue to say it until, you know,
The cows come
as an artist, when you're going into something, learn the business, learn the different mediums to promote your music. Now there's digital. Digital is not the only thing. Streaming is not the only way to promote your music. You have the streaming platforms, great. You also have these blogs that are playing. These blogs are still there. These online media blogs, they are still there. They are evolving, not just to doing written content, but they're now doing visual content as well. That's another way to promote your music. Do you get what I mean? And then there's also radio. Radio will always be there no matter what. Radio should always be in your plan for promoting your music, because you just never know. Because gone are the days where if you're an artist back in the day, your music, if you're going to promote music, you'll be using billboards, you'll be using posters, you'll be doing this and that to try and reach certain people. You have street teams doing this. But obviously,
which is still valid. No, it is still valid. If you have the budget, it's valid to be.
Yeah. But now, like I said, if you're coming into this, learn about the different marketing ways, the way you promote your music, the platforms that you promote your music. It's important to actually like maximize all of it, because on one media whichever outlet, there's a certain demographic, there's a certain audience. You're trying to reach you're already trying to reach an audience, but that audience is not there. But that audience is on the other side. Absolutely. So are you going to tell me you're just going to keep to that one and not go and...
Absolutely. And this is exactly why I'm having this conversation, because I was doing that homework. That is exactly the homework I was doing when I realized, hold on, one demographic is on one end of the spectrum and another demographic is on another end of the spectrum. Is there even a middle point? That was my main concern was, but no, Tayo has proven us wrong, because he's a millennial. They have a radio station. They play only Christian music. So we can't discount the fact that young Christians still listen to radio. It'd be interesting to know, Tayo, if your stats show that younger people listen to your station, for example.
Yeah, I mean, most of the feedback that we've gotten have been from younger people. I think so I think part of it is social media. With social media, we get so much information. And obviously with the younger generation, you have a lot of people who are thought leaders. They know what to do. If you follow my 3-step plan, you'll get 1 million streams. And people are literally following, all right, cool. So I know that I'm dropping my song, so I need to send it to Spotify. I have to send it to Apple at least before the song goes out. So hopefully I can get put into the editorial playlists, and then hopefully the song will come out, and then I'll get my reach. But there's no plan, there's no marketing plan behind it. They don't understand the role of other platforms. So for me, the way I look at radio is that it may not be as big as you expect it to be. It may not give you all the views that you want, but you use that as part of the hype that you're building. You use that as part of the buzz that you're building. So if I want to even pitch to a playlist, I'll let them know, actually, I've been on this and this and this local radio. I've done this and this and this. Even because with the artists I manage, that's what we did. We got a couple of radio plays. And when it came to actually booking, trying to get a certain gig, which was like an invite-only gig, that's how we pitched it. And he went straight through, and he ended up being the headliner. So there's no, like, a lot of these people. Okay, let me even be specific. The Christian scene versus the secular scene, because I get because I DJ on both sides, right? And I get music from secular people coming into. In fact, I'm so far behind, it's ridiculous. Every single day I get at least 50 songs every single day, and I've only just started getting put onto these lists. Now, with all the Christian people that I've dealt with, most of them don't know. Most of them don't know how to put together an EPK. Most of them don't know. They'll send me a song and it says ABC song mastered 3.7, and then you look at the bit rate and it's like 96. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, it's really, really badly quality. Or they download their own song. They'll download their own song from YouTube to send it to me, and it's kind of like these basic things. So I did a.
This is why I do
a,
equilibrium. This is why I do this.
And this is why again, like Taya, what you said, like I said, when I said before about the education part, learning what you're going into, this is so important. And this is one of the reasons why like GMIA is so important, because we are the way that we are really hammering in terms of like this education, like knowing your thing. Because if you don't know it and you fail, don't come and blame people for not supporting you because you didn't do the groundwork. So you need to do this. So that's why, like, when because our well, not fight, but our real mission is to really try and get millennials, like your age group, understanding who are artists. Like, you see, like, it's great that you're doing this, but you need to understand the mechanics. You need to understand the business behind this thing. We're giving you the resources. Come and learn how to do it. This is what you need. If you want to succeed, this is what you need. So that's the challenge now that GMIA have in terms of making sure these artists are actually understanding what they need to do. Like, exactly what you said. I've seen it. Yeah.
Roger's looking to say something.
Tayo, you raised a point there, about the secular scene, and I think that sometimes we're in some sort of myth when we become Christian artists. We think that God's gonna somehow make us, catapult us into stardom. I am saying, and it's just like, let me just be straight with people, man. Like, these. It's frustrating. It's one of the most painful things that radio, Christian DJs, Christian radio DJs. I say Christian because I know, but there's artists. But the only reason why you get a BBC One Extra because you actually send it to them. Yeah.
Yes.
So how on earth, and something that involved my name similar to Roger Moore, but I remember watching Roger Moore doing an interview, the actual real one. He's a bit lighter than me, and he said on the way up, you make sure you take care of everyone, because when you're on the way down, they're there to support you. And the reality show is some people get to the heights, but they don't talk to us. So when their situations kind of like change and they need to, we're like, who are you? Oh, Sugar, I ain't got none of your music for the past 2-3 years, and I don't really play your playlist. And I think it's really important. It hurts artists that love Christian music. We've been doing this for 20 odd years, and we love to see young, fresh talent, and they can't be bothered. Yeah.
and I think part of the reason is because they might have this misconception that radio is not important, you see.
But the thing
even though my survey, sorry to interrupt you there, Roger, but even though my survey showed that there was a leaning to that, I wanted to actually maybe prove that to be wrong, because if people have that misconception, if I talk to people, like I'm asking you in church, where do you listen to music? Oh, I listen to YouTube. I'm asking people on the street, where do you listen? I listen to Spotify, and I'm an artist, and I don't get a well-rounded view. I could go away with that misconception that all I need to do is put my music on YouTube and Spotify. I don't need to bother about radio. So it could well be that, that finding is something that other people have discovered without digging deeper. And so they've gone off to say, well, I don't need radio. Could there be that as well? Could that be part of the problem?
But the reality show is their peers at the same age are doing the radio, who's not doing gospel, who's not doing
that's a good point.
So end of the day, the mindset's there. They're just really lazy when it comes to getting the relationships. And listen, we will push these guys, and the reality show is, I said this to T, and I'll be honest with you guys, man, as you can imagine, I'm an honest guy. When we get phone calls about doing gigs, when we get phone calls for doing awards, we push people who we're talking to because we have a relationship and we know the people. So if you want to get them on, if you're sick aside of seeing the same 5 people go for the awards every year, no hint. I'm not saying that we have, it's okay moaning about it, because I moan about it. But the thing is, if you don't have a relationship with industry people, I've been around from 1995, so I know a few people. So I'm not saying that Roger's the God, far from it. But you got Sister T, you've got Tayo, you got all these people that that know the industry, communicate, have relationship, and they'll be like, yo, Lecrae's coming over. So tell you what, my boy's got a good attitude. He's got a good vibe. I have a relationship with him. I trust him to go and do this gig, because we don't. It's what we don't trust and we don't have a relationship with. So if you're fed up with the gigs of being one-dimensional, now it's time to step out. So it's a trade secret. Yeah, I want to put forward what I have a connection to.
one of the things that we're trying to get out of today's session is closing as much as we can. Obviously, we're not going to do it in one conversation, but at least helping artists to close that knowledge gap. And I think, obviously, last year, going into this year, a lot of artists have realized that they need multiple sources of income, not just record a song, go into studio, release music and gig. And so this point on pivoting and mentoring sessions that Audrey has mentioned, if you're watching and you're an artist, go on to @industrydeveloper on Instagram. I believe, is it on Twitter or anywhere else, or is it just Instagram?
Yeah, it's on Twitter and Facebook.
Exactly. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Go search @industrydeveloper, because one of the things I'm hoping we can take away from today's session is some information that we can, practical information that we can put to practice, put to good use. Industry Developer, contact her, get a mentoring session. She can analyze your skill sets, your giftings, your abilities, and then give you some steer in direction of where you can go and what you can do to pivot, take advantage of, optimize the situation, because it's not necessarily going away anytime soon. Even I literally today, honestly, even today, I had a phone call with my MD today talking about strategy for the year in terms of virtual gigs and being prepared. So what are we doing in that kind of space? Thinking about, okay, we're not necessarily going to be going out just yet. I'm having those conversations. We're thinking about how to be more proactive just in case we don't get to go out physically. So, if you're not really clear on what you want to do strategically or what other alternatives you have to utilize your gifting, speak to Audrey. She's not paying me for this, by the way, but I thought it was really good when she mentioned that. I could just see artists benefiting from those conversations, because some of us struggle, and that's why I'm playing devil's advocate on this platform. I'm asking what may sound like obvious questions, but these are the questions I get asked, and some people struggle with. Some people don't even know where to go for mentoring, where to go for help, who to talk to ask some of the most basic questions. And I think that would be at least one takeaway from today's session. But that actually kind of is a good segue to one of the key things I wanted to kind of highlight, which is plugging this knowledge gap. We already kind of said what are the bare minimum bits of information or skill sets that artists need, and we've kind of alluded to marketing, we've alluded to being smart in terms of just business and entrepreneurial skills, having good music, writing, but just holistically, and I'll probably go with you, Audrey, because of the GMIA and knowing some of the courses that are available. I've actually registered for a couple myself, and the industry is evolving every day. I mean, only today I was on the PRS, it was yesterday, the 19th of June. I was on the PRS AGM because I'm a voting member of the PRS. And there were so many interesting questions that were asked at the AGM. One of the questions was, how is PRS going to respond to licensing online gigs that we artists do on, say, a Facebook or an Instagram? And only a couple of weeks ago, there's been a development whereby when you sell an event, a ticketed event on Facebook or whatever, you can actually get your licensing, because as a PRS member, you go on and report your performances on PRS. If you do a ticketed performance on Facebook or whatever, with the new legislation, the new developments in place, you can actually get paid. The point I'm making is that was at yesterday's AGM. That's new information. There's always new information literally per second in the music industry. So which is why I think attending things like workshops, attending things like, even this panel, this conversation itself is informative. But I know that there are more formal, structured platforms and outlets where people can get, proper information. And I just want to let you, Audrey, talk a bit more about the GMIA and some of the things that you're doing to help plug the gap.
So one of the first things that I started to work with when I jumped into GMIA was to be able to connect with the different music organizations and funding bodies, because I know for myself, it's only this year that I started to apply for funding of projects that I do, and that's terrible. Do you know what I mean? So I started to have conversations with them, and the interesting thing is they wanted to have those conversations because they want to know, why aren't more gospel people applying? They were asking, why aren't we applying? Is it something on the form? Is it something innate to us? What is the tipping points that is making this process difficult? So we've been able to have really good discussions with a few of those bodies, and be able to sort of collaborate to do workshops to be able to facilitate directly to the gospel community. So we specially requested those to be done to the gospel community. And one of those organizations, PRS Foundation, we have a workshop coming up this Monday with them. So we've asked them, they're like, what do you want us to do in the workshop? Show us the form. Let us know how we complete the form. Let us know which projects are more likely to, well, not more likely, but what type of projects should we be submitting? Because there's no point submitting a project that it doesn't fit organization's criteria.
Yeah.
So, and in that way, you can literally go away and build a project and then complete the form. Do you know what I mean? So you can work it to your advantage in that sense. So we've got a workshop coming up this Monday, which definitely go and register. Go to gmia.org.uk, click on market events, and you'll see all the events that we've got so far. So we've got PRS, we've got CCLI, PPL, PRS Foundation, of course, Help Musicians. They do funding as well. And they're doing quite some new stuff to help that funding process be a lot easier. Just Secured Arts Council. So you're going to get bags of knowledge. Definitely, I'll be making notes. Definitely, I will be making notes. So, yeah, definitely to jump on those things. I think we don't apply often enough, and maybe Sharice can say something about that as well. In that, again, it goes back to not having that entrepreneurial vision in the first place. That as Black people, I think we just soldier on.
That's true, though. There's that as well, yeah.
True, when I completed the survey and it started to define the different types of racism as in direct, indirect, and microaggressions. When I saw the definitions, it really hit me hard that, oh yeah, that's what that scenario was about. And that was, but because we get on with it people, because we've almost become accustomed to it, we don't even realize that we've been attacked in that way. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think it'd be interesting to actually have a survey for the survey to see the repercussions of that, because if you're forever making excuses for other people's behavior, it then becomes quite critical as what's the long-term impact of that. As women, we're all women here.
Coincidentally.
I'm sure we've experienced sexism in the industry. That's mainstream.
Oh, yeah.
Industry.
Do you know what? Just today, I made an observation, and I'm that kind of person. When I see things, I kind of act. I made an observation. I'm not going to tell you what it was, but I messaged somebody straight away to say, women, ? I saw something, and it was no female representation whatsoever in a very reputable music platform. And I messaged somebody has got like an insider, position. I'm like, women ? So it's present, which is quite sad. And we work really hard, which is a bit frustrating. We work extra hard.
Correct. And we're a bit of an anomaly like that, because you're Black, you're a woman, you face sexism and very ageism even. So sometimes it's because you're too old, you'll get it. Because you're too young to get it. Too cute, you'll get it. It's like there's a whole other pocket that needs to be examined there, and the repercussion of those things. But yeah, I want to encourage everybody to go to the GMI website and click on Marketplace. There's a whole host of workshops that we've got running. Definitely go and sign up. Listen, I'll be chasing you. If I see certain people didn't join that workshop and they come and ask me anything afterwards.
You can send them to the replay. Hopefully they'll be recorded. I don't know.
73 million, where was you? That would be my question. At least try. Listen. Sometimes it's like getting a Grammy because you don't win it the first time, but try again.
Listen, there is money out there.
Correct.
I sit on the board of HMUK. I'm on the board. Excuse the baby. I sit on the board of HMUK, and we are working with the Arts Council. I was on a forum yesterday with Caroline Dinage, and she was talking about how much money they've given to diverse audiences.
Right.
And it's into the millions, and they're looking to invest a billion. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, they've got a box to tick, so we need to.
They're ticking boxes. You know what? They're ticking boxes. But you know what? They're ticking boxes. You need to be ticking that box.
Ticking boxes as well. Exactly.
That's what I'm trying to say. Listen, the thing is, one thing I've learned by doing Black Lives in Music, one aspect is, sorry to bring race into it, but white musicians. Seriously, what's going on? Sorry about this. White musicians understand funding.
Yeah.
If they understand they needed to get through music education, They need it to launch their careers. They understand it, and they learn, like everybody else, how to apply.
Yeah.
Just like Audrey says, Black people, we're just going through it because that's what we've been taught to do from the beginning of time. We're just going through it. And that just also how a lot of organizations are started, like say Help Musicians. This is a bit of a tangent. It goes, they're just started by people coming together for a cause. One thing that irritates me, and I don't want to see it no more, please don't leave the room, I don't want to see it no more, is this thing, gospel music is a scene. There's no infrastructure. There's no, how many Christians, gospel music artists are there out there? How many churches? We are the biggest community of people that I can even think of right now. I can't even think of the Black Christian community. That's how we're here and we're able to thrive, because our ancestors, our parents and our grandparents paved the way for us as a community. They lived their life and did partners so they can feed their kids and pay their mortgage. Why hasn't the church, and I know this is a question that comes around, but why haven't we come together, applied for the funding, created an entity where you can put that music out? Oh, I think there is already one. It's called the GMIA. I beg, everybody come together. Yeah,
I love how you said I beg. I like that.
Come together. One representing body. No, the big GMIA do something else. But you can have record labels. You can come together and put your money in a pot. Apply for funding. Record labels apply for funding. They're just creative with it. They go to the Arts Council and say, I want to do in a festival an event.
Right.
They get the project grant, tip-top another 20 grand on it, and they can do stuff that we don't do because we don't have the knowledge. Yeah. And this is knowledge gaps. So I cannot, I cannot reiterate it enough. Audrey and the GMIA team have put together something that is crucial. The next one, I believe, the first one's about funding, right?
Yeah.
You not need to be there and telling everybody to come along and listen, because everybody out there and everybody that's successful didn't just do it. They got a leg up. They got funding. And now they're able, don't get me wrong, it's still a struggle, but at least they're able to thrive. And don't let money worry about that specific project. And if you don't have the knowledge, the same organizations will teach you what to do with the money. At the same time.
That's right. Yeah.
I know that because I have inside information. I'm on the board of HMUK, so I know what they do. So I can't reiterate it enough. Go to all of the workshop. If you're really about if you're really about wanting sustainability and in your career, go to these workshops.
Yep. Advise people, and I think artists, we don't do that as much. Creatives, we don't do that as much, So what I would advise is get a lead magnet, something that you give to people for free, and get them into your email list where you begin to nurture and serve them, regularly. And when they're ready to purchase, and you obviously you have to be ready at all times to sell something. When they're ready, you are there because they've constantly seen you show up in their email box and not just on the social media platform. So as much as we want the social media platforms to reward us and work for us, we also have to think strategically. How can these get these people into my pipeline so that if Facebook decides, Mark decides that, okay, no more Facebook, I still have people.
What do you benefit?
I can sell my merchandise to.
Yeah. I feel like nonetheless, these are very valid points, and I always play devil's advocate on these platforms. I feel like nonetheless, if I was an authentic creative, all I care for is for people to hear my music. So I'm going to speak to David. Should we just keep the integrity of, oh, I'm an artist, I'm coming here to share my music, that's me? Or should we go, I want to make business, I want to sell merch, I want to get your email, I want to sell you stuff, because ultimately that is another way to sustain the art, because at the end of the day you need to pay for studio time, right? So what are your thoughts? Should we just use social media to be like, yeah, I'm just putting my music out there, let me get people to hear my songs? Or should we be thinking, actually, how can I get, you know, merch, how can I make sales or become a millionaire, you know, things like that?
Yeah. First of all, let me apologize for all the hoo-ha and just going back and forth. Like, I nearly lost my mind.
Oh, bless. Everything will be
You're in now.
all right. Everything will fall in.
Yes.
Hey, that's my job.
I love it.
Oh, thank you guys. So yeah, apologies for that. So much going on. But to answer your question, I always go back to what do I want, right? And sometimes that's a very difficult question to answer, just because a lot of times we're not really honest with ourselves. So for me, I always go back to what it is that I want. And as artists, we can't say we all want the same things, right? Some people are genuinely okay with just letting to be honest, I'm at the place now, especially now that I focus more on vocal coaching, and vocal coaching is kind of like my 9 to 5, as it were, right? And now I'm at the place where I'm like, my music, I legit just want people to hear it and enjoy it. And I'm not so much focused on, you know, how many streams anymore, and oh my gosh, how do I blow? How do I become a superstar? So I think for everybody, it kind of starts with that, just knowing what is it do I want, and then kind of walking backwards and saying, okay, well, this is what I said what I want. This is how I need to get there. And you know, even the path is going to be different for different people. So to answer your question, obviously, if you're trying to make this thing a business, like earning actual money from it, then social media is definitely one of the tools, and you have to the social media game.
How do you play the social media game? You know,
first of all, I would say consistency, right? Like when you're talking algorithms as well, like you can't. I mean, I don't want to say you can't, because you can.
You can't just like, boom like that.
Yeah, if you're trying to actually build a community and you want to see like engagement, you have to kind of almost have a calendar. And a lot of artists, we're not used to that sort of. I know I'm not used to that sort of
That's
stuff.
why I love having artists on the panel, so I can get the real, the artist perspective.
There was a time that I had a calendar, and it was like, okay, this is what I post on Monday, this is what I post on Tuesday, and I had all these content pillars. And honestly, it got to a point where I was so focused on aesthetics that I realized that I stopped creating. And it got so bad that I wouldn't put out a video because, oh my gosh, background, oh my gosh, lighting, oh my gosh, I haven't got the best phone.
Color scheme and things like that,
I had to like call myself out and check myself. Like, David, you built your following with crappy phones and crappy lighting. So it's as you grow, obviously you have to find that balance of you want, you know, quality, but at the same time, don't forget, like, don't completely dismiss why you started what you did. And for me, I never started music because, I want to, you know, it would be nice to be a superstar, but that's not the driving force for me. Because if it was, I probably wouldn't even be doing the kind of music that I do, if I'm being honest. So there are all these different factors that come into play, and I just put it back in and say, know what you want, be honest. Like, it's okay to not want, like, when I say no, everyone wants to be successful, right? But then success means different things to different people. Like, you know, at this stage, it will be nice for my song to be #1, but honestly, I don't really care.
Some of us are rooting for you in that space, as you know. Exactly. So some of us are literally going, bruh.
Right. I mean, so for me, it would be nice, and you know, I do hope that those things happen. But to be honest, it's not like I'm not going to sacrifice everything else that I believe in just to achieve that. And I'm the sort of person that I don't. It's just my nature. I don't like forcing things, especially like something so personal to me, like music. Like, this is a gift. There's a purpose attached to it. There's fulfillment and enjoyment. The moment I start to play the trends game, or, you know, I don't really have anything to say, but I have to post something, it kind of loses the essence for me.
The originality.
And I can't speak for everybody, but like I said, there was a time where I actually stopped creating because I had this idea of what my content needed to look like. And then in the process, I was actually starving the audience that I built.
That's a really good point. I find it's also, sorry, you're going to say something, Kathy?
No, I just said that's really honest. It's like what I said. I know you weren't in the call at the time, but you know, not having that guilt. Like if you haven't got anything to post, and you don't want to post anything, log out. Like no one's gonna beat you over the head. Like, you know, like
owe no one anything.
That genuinity, I think it can be so lost on social media these days, and people can see through it. I love what David said about, you know, he was losing he was starving the fan base he had built off of his genuine content. But now all of this, you know, pretty, aesthetically pleasing stuff was there, but who was it serving? Who was it feeding? Who was it nourishing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good point. I really love that.
Yeah. And I think one other thing that we tend to look at is stats, which is kind of the subtitle of this today's episode, because I remember there was a time when I wake up in the morning and first thing I'm looking at when I pick up my phone is social media. How many likes to the post from yesterday? How many views and all that? It got to a point I literally had to put, because I have folders on my phone for different things, and I have the Bible app in the folder of so that when I go to the social media folder, I'll see my Bible first. I need to read my Bible before I go on social media. And not that it changed things for so long, but at least it helped, if I'll be brutally honest. But the truth is, the stats can be depressing. Sometimes you look at another account and you're like, wow, they posted this thing 5 minutes ago and they have 1,000 likes. And I posted this thing 2 days ago and I have 20 likes. And just to kind of address that, particularly because 2 weeks ago, we were talking about the knowledge gap in the creative space. And one thing that came up was the mental health, just taking care of your mental health as an artist. And I feel like social media drains our mental health, our well-being, and it can be depressing when we look at the lies that are online and think and compare our truths to those lies. When we compare ourselves, we always fall short. And I just wanted you to speak into that particular, maybe Kathy, on, you know, just that burden that sometimes gets placed, or that we even take upon ourselves by virtue of getting sucked in to the world of, and to the lies, you know, of social media, particularly the visual ones, the more visual ones like, you know, Instagram, TikTok and things like that.
Oh yeah, I just lost I was just about to say something in response to what you said and I completely lost it. But what I would say, I would like to challenge what you said actually and say, I don't think social media is lies actually. I think they are an element of truth, but not the whole truth. So people only show us those pretty sides. They only show us those nice things. But part of it is their truth. It's their truth for 5 seconds. Like you might be out with your friends and everybody's eating, everyone's quiet. Then you pull out a phone and everyone's like, yeah. So for 2 seconds, everyone's like, woo. Then you put your phone down, everyone's gone silent again, gone back, you know, to doing whatever they were doing. So it's a truth, but it's not the whole truth. And I think when we realize that, that's when we're freer. For me, I will say, you know, the thing is about stats and looking at the numbers, you will never ever be satisfied.
We already have complicated topics on the table with what we just talked about in terms of the fee and the splits on the songwriting. I don't know what you guys think about how this could muddy the waters even more if we then came and said, and to be fair, it is standard, it is business, it should be the norm. But what do you reckon? How complicated do you reckon the conversation could become if we're talking about a fee, we're talking about the PRS split, and then we talk about the MCPS, which a lot of people, as you said, Gozayam, don't even really know what it means. But as Paul has rightly pointed out, that's money being thrown away as well. Not for me, obviously, for you guys, because I'm the artist. So
I mean, that's just saying at like 5% as well. That's not saying like if you're doing any more on other people's stuff, but like say this month you would have earned 50 quid.
But then the argument, because if this becomes a thing that becomes a norm, the argument from artists could be, well, if you're getting that percentage on the MCPS, you're getting a percentage on the PRS, then we can renegotiate your fee. if I were going to speak from an artist perspective, that would be my stance.
That's fine. It's just a lot of this boils down to your agreement before you start working too.
Yeah.
So like, if you don't agree it before you do it and the contracts and stuff don't state it, then you're not entitled to it because you've agreed that you're not entitled to it. But whereas if you say beforehand, I feel like I'm entitled to do whatever, maybe you're paying me a lower fee than I'd already accept, so I take a higher percentage, then fine. But sometimes if you're saying that normally you would take between 1% and 5% of the mechanicals, but we're throwing it away because CDs, it's so hard to do it on CDs, yet we're in a streaming age where you could potentially be earning 50 quid extra a month off one artist. And then if you're producing for multiple people, add that up to however much. We're potentially throwing away money that could be in our benefit for 5% or something.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a very, very, very valid point. In this industry right now, I think.
Which one? The gospel industry or the music industry? Okay.
No, the gospel industry. Because anytime I've done anything outside of gospel music, it's not even a conversation. And or I do something with a record company, it's not a conversation. It's just what it is. It's like, did you write on it? Yeah, great, cool, great. You do whatever. Did you produce it? Yeah, this is great. I mean, it's even so deep that when I work with record companies, until they pay me my full balance, I own the record.
Wow, are you kidding?
Yeah.
No way.
That's how it works, actually.
Do you know if it's crazy?
Hey, yeah.
I'm just thinking about how many, and I know I can only speak for myself because I know I don't ever owe anyone, but I can imagine people have told me, I mean, producers have told me stories of people who never pay or just walk away from a product. So I can imagine how much content you could actually own from the failed, the bad debt and things.
But,
wow.
But I think that comes, if we take it a bit biblical, that the point where we say, you're going into something, you must count the costs.
Absolutely, before you even step out.
Yes, and counting the cost is not just how much am I going to spend, but is having a good understanding of what it's really going to cost, both in your time, in your research, and in the money you expend, and the money you're going to earn later on. It's a lot. It's a massive industry. I think it's the accessibility, the easy access has made a lot of people lazy.
Yeah,
and
this
that's
is it.
Both producers, musicians, artists. Because it's like, oh, I'm just doing it. I just really, really need to make money from this, and I'm gonna do it real quick and get out, get the money and run. And we lose out on a lot of money. You're right. We lose out on a lot of money, and it's taking education. And the thing is, the education is so convoluted, but you just have to persevere and look for it, look for the information, ask whoever you need to ask, and have these conversations continually. But if you're doing this full time, and this is for producers, it is not very easy to just say that, because you might lose a lot of clients initially.
That's the thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Fighting this battle, and that is just the reality. So you just have to decide, how you want to fight it, because you can be very dogmatic and be like, no, I'm not going to do this. But then you have to decide, okay, well, is this a long-term battle I'm willing to fight? And yes, I need this money to live right now, so I will do this, and I'll keep fighting this, and I'll keep educating myself on this. And obviously, the more value you have as a person or as a producer, the easier it is to have these discussions. Because even the percentages on the mechanicals, it's stated like just in loads of publishing journals that it's between 1% to 5%. And the disparity there is just dependent on the value of the producer. So if you're a big boy producer, you're going to be getting the 5%. If you're starting out and whatever, you're in the 1% to 2% bracket. So again, it's what you negotiate. You get what you negotiate. But again, it's the artist has to understand. And the difficulty is that loads of artists are record companies now.
Pretty much. But then we're record companies without knowing what a record company is supposed to know. Exactly. So it's just like this huge knowledge gap, which is one of the reasons why I'm doing these things, is to help us really understand the process and literally the legalistic aspects as well, like the contracts and the conversations you need to have prior to even starting, you know, the journey of going into production. But just one question I was going to ask on the contract side of things, the legal conversations. You mentioned, Gozi, that you find it easier when you're talking to labels or outside of the gospel space. Is that the norm? Because I've heard people say things like that, that when it comes to business or contracts, it's more awkward when you're dealing with people within our space, which I find really a bit unsettling. Is that what you experience as well, given that you've done both sides of the fence, if that makes sense?
Yeah, for sure, because I think that contracts just generally make people nervous. And once you see like a few pages, you're like, oh my gosh, you know, I need a lawyer, and you know, and lawyers are not cheap. Like, if you're going to do it the right way. So I find that people shy away from it sometimes. And so then everything else is quite verbal. And when it's a verbal contract, anything can change because I said, you said kind of thing. Yeah. So I say that what I found easy as well is that in this new age of technology, like courts will accept email.
I was just going to say emails are a good middle ground.
And even text messages now where you can see a trail of a conversation. So you ask a question, hey, blah, 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 how much do you charge? I charge £500. If you agree to do it, you say, yes, that is a contract. Literally, that's you know, because I had my sister-in-law is a lawyer, and just asked questions. So it's like, okay, what is a contract? What constitutes a contract? It's like the legally
binding.
Yeah, you know. Well. So it's like, okay, what they ask. They ask the response and the agreement or whatever. And most of the times, you now have the they have a name for it where you says what laws, what country the laws what am I trying to say? Yeah, it applies to. So are you doing it UK law, US law, Canadian law, Nigerian law, whatever? You have to know exactly because they differ. So that would be the only other thing at the end of the contract that kind of helps it along. So you can do things that way. But that's a tedious process. We said it just now in like 2-3 minutes, but to have the paperwork, do that, cross your T's, dot your I's, make sure it's dated, it's signed. And then actually there's some contracts that if you sign just by yourself without a witness, it's null and void, and it's just I
think yeah, because I mean, looking at it from my perspective as an artist, when you go to a producer, you're not looking at, ideally you're not looking at contracts and, you know, legal conversations and lawyers. You're like, oh, this is my brother in church, or, you know, this is this guy who's an MD in my sister's church or whatever, or oh, I met him at an event and I know he produces X, Y, and Z. So they're kind of looking at it more as a less formal conversation. However, there is the importance of formalizing the conversations, talking about, you know, the fees, talking about the payment terms, talking about the scope of work that's being covered, whether you're going to mix as part of the production and they need to master with somebody else, or you're going to do the entire thing from top to bottom. I know it's a bit tedious when we talk about contracts, but I'd like to suggest maybe that at least emails, you know, between both parties, and you just kind of save them somewhere. I literally have a folder where I save important email conversations I have, so I literally know this is what was said, or I flag the emails even with a color in my email folder, so I know this is what was said and, you know, this is what was agreed, and then there can be no disputes. And it's very important, I say to people, don't burn your bridges. Even if you think, oh, I'm just going to work with this individual once and then I move on, don't burn your bridges. Relationships are very important, and it's very critical as Christians that we always leave a good impression with whoever we work with. And I'm speaking more to artists now, because I've heard so many things producers say to me about artists, and I feel bad as an artist. I'm like, can we not do these things? You know, can we pay, you know, whoever we've agreed to pay on time? And if we're struggling, can we let them know, you know, just give notice if we need to? But we need to be responsible, because we're ministers, we're on stage, we're proclaiming God's word, we're preaching the gospel in music. We have to be people of integrity. I don't know where that came from. It's a bit of a segue. But anyway, I thought I'd just throw that in there. And I'm sure you guys... And I think the topic of publishing, licensing, and metadata, as critical as they are to our success as independent artists, tend to be one of the areas where we don't know much. We are basically either misinformed or ill-informed or not informed at all in terms of what we need to know, what the fundamentals are. And I think one of the biggest areas where we just don't even know where to start is, what is publishing? What is music publishing, and why is it so important to independent artists, or even just to artists in general? So maybe, Les, you can just give us that basic 101 on what publishing is.
Yeah, I'd love to. Basically, to publish means to make known. So, and the whole thing is that if you write a song, and everyone thinks is the greatest song ever written, you want the rest of the world to hear it. And basically, that is a publisher's job. So there's two main jobs of a publisher. One is to promote your song, and the other one is to administrate it, look after all the royalties that should be due to you, that they collect for you. They make sure your song is registered properly, all different organizations, and they collect their money for you. And the publisher protects the song. The publisher stewards the song and cares for it, and just make sure that it makes, maximizes in terms of exposure, but also that it's cared for. And even, we've got this thing like, with some people try to change lyrics of songs and then publishers no, and a lot of the things you have to ask the permission of the publisher for the song to be used. That's because really they're just protecting it and looking out for it. And it's just, I think for a songwriter to have someone who's in a way is going to sell your song or take your song further than you could have done on your own. That's a great thing, because the publisher normally has many more contacts than you have, and knows a lot more people than you do, and they know artists. They know artists that are looking for songs to record on next album. And they have your song ready to share it out. So the main thing is that they look after the song. They make it known, and also they protect it for you.
And it's interesting because in today's age where it's very difficult to get a record deal in order to thrive as an artist, everyone's more or less independent. And I feel like there's this misconception that a distributor is technically a publisher. And I know that some distributors have actually started offering, some publishing services on the side. So how would you help an artist know the difference between a distributor? Because they could say, well, the distributor's making my song known. They're putting it on Spotify. They're putting it on Apple. Yeah. How is that different from a publisher? What is the publisher really going to effectively do with my song that, say, a CD Baby or a TuneCore isn't already doing? And I'm asking that question from the perspective of somebody who doesn't really know the difference between distribution and publishing, because to the naked eye, it's like, yeah, my song is on Spotify, so it's published,
Well, distribution has to do with product, and publishing has to do with the song and the copy of it. So, if you want to have more streams or sell more albums, that's what a distributor does. So they get the CD or music out as far as they can. But publisher, they look after the copyright to make sure that that all the money that's due to it is collected. And so it's much more like an admin situation than us. Than trying to get the music out. It's trying to make sure it's cared for.
So they're basically looking after. So I think the key word to take away from this in terms of differentiating between the publisher and the distributor is that the publisher is looking after the song and looking out for opportunities where the song can be, in the publishing terms, exploited. That's the word that I've learned to use it in the industry, opportunities to exploit the song. And what would that typically look like, Keith? Because you've worked in all these, reputable organizations. What would it look like when, somebody gets a publishing deal? And obviously we're in a very niche kind of genre, Christian and gospel. And I feel like sometimes the Christian artist could be like, well, they're not going to use my worship song in in a movie or in an ad. So what would that look like in reality? What could be the motivator for a Christian and gospel artist to be like, yeah, let's get a publisher who could not only look after but look out for opportunities to exploit the song? And given your experience in those organizations in the industry, it'd be interesting to see how you found that, particularly for people within our space.
Well, that's a good question. The thing about publishers is that they have relationships with all these entities, with networks, with other music publishers, with labels, with TV networks, Netflix. They have all these relationships, right? And in fact, when I worked at 21st Century Fox, I found something interesting that they would deliver their their movies or TV shows to something called in-flight entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
In-flight entertainment. And I was like, in-flight entertainment, that's interesting. I was like, oh, okay. Wow, they're really going out. They've really got relationships with everybody and everything. So they even deliver their content to airlines.
Right?
And I'm sure they deliver their content to ships, and deliver their contents to all sorts of other places where there are a bunch of people at one time, to malls, to whatever. That's what publishers do. They have those relationships with those people on the back end who are responsible for licensing music for the use in their establishments, like an airline, like a ship, like a mall, like a church. Like a function, like a party that's a public party, a carnival, right? Publishers ensure that when people want to use that song for whatever reason, that they are able to license it and you are able to be paid from that license. So I would say is that the most important thing to understand is that the publishers have relationships with all these different entities and all these different clubs and hair salons and barbershops and all of them. There's a system in place to ensure that if your music is playing in one of these places, they're retrieving the money and paying you out. So that's really because then you will have to go and have all these relationships yourself, which you couldn't. Kind of crazy. And not just locally, but globally. Right, publishers have these global relationships, so that's how it works out for you as an independent artist.
But more so as a Christian or gospel independent artist, do you think that we're on the losing end, if I could call it that, because of the kind of music that we produce? I mean, there is that misconception, hence why typically artists don't really look to bother to get publishing.
No, I mean, I would say because I've been in this situation, Sarah, where I've been privileged to be part of songs that the global church is sang. So the song, like 10,000 Reasons, Shine Jesus Shine, all those songs, I was privileged to be around when they were written. But then those songs become used by the whole church around the world. But if you want to say secular or whatever, mainstream songs, they're not used in church. And they're not sung that way. So we have just almost like a different audience. Yeah. And then our songs are used in a different way. Fortunately, as well, an organization called CCLI was set up, and that was to reward the songwriters who are writing the songs for the church. And so CCLI is really like the PRS for the church. So when songs are used in church and they're signed to CCLI, then the writers also receive an income from that as well. And so for many of the writers, that's been very beneficial.
And what I'll say too on that, Sarah, as well, CCLI is doing a really great work, and more needs to be known about CCLI and what they do, because I did have a conversation recently with some people in America, and they were saying, well, we do a lot of these songs in our churches, but how do we collect the money? There's no, but this is in the Black community, so the gospel community, right?
Just your regular Spotify profile will tell you which songs are the most popular and and have been downloaded the most. And that lets you know too, well, was my up-tempo song more popular? Are my slow songs more popular, right? And which songs are kind of resonating with my audience? And it lets you know how many monthly listeners are listening to you. So it lets you know, are they coming back each month? Are they revisiting your site, right? Are they really fans? Are they following you? And it also lets you know, once they play the song, do they save the music? Because if they save it, they're putting it in a playlist. They're listening to that song over and over. And so that really lets you know, this is something similar they'd like to hear in this style again. It also informs type of new music you might put out. And so your audience is giving you information indirectly, right? And then you can directly ask them, like you said, who do I remind you of? Or tell me what you like about my music, or ask them, how do you feel when you hear my music? Does my music encourage you? You know, what do you feel you know, empowered in some way? And you could let them know what your goal is. You know, if your goal is to empower, if your goal is to encourage, do you feel encouraged by my music? You know, is it working? And get that interaction with your audience. So once you're clear who your audience is and kind of where they are, then you can target your marketing to them. You actually can do ads that go and find your audience. And you can make what's called an avatar. And I think Cass will have more details on this. You can build an avatar for those artists that your audience says that you remind them of, or that you self-identify with. So if I said, I feel like I'm a mixture of Yolanda Adams and Barbara Streisand and Celine Dion, say if you just mixed up all these different people, and Kirk Franklin, just throw in Kirk Franklin
exactly.
just for good measure. Then you go and find all the fans who like those artists and target your ads to those people. And introduce yourself to them, because again, you're not for the whole world, you're for certain people who are looking for you and artists like you, and target your ads to them. And it's the same way with the gospel, right? We're not going to be able to reach everybody, but we're going to reach who we're called to reach with our personal style of ministry. So although we're called to the world, you know, we might be called to our corner of the world, to the people who relate to our message in the way that we bring it. And so we want to target our message for the people who are waiting for us, and they just don't know it because they haven't met us yet.
Absolutely. And I think, talking about ads, there's a number of different ways that we can create
for us, and they just don't know it because they haven't met us yet.
Absolutely. And I think, talking about ads, there's a number of different ways that we can create ads. It's a bit of a conundrum, to be honest, because there's the front end. If you're on Facebook or Instagram, you can boost an ad from the front end, literally from the front of the app. But then there's the Facebook Business Manager, which is the back end, where you can create a campaign, create an ad set, and then create ads. And it's it's almost like a science in itself, and it's constantly changing and constantly being updated by Facebook. But that is definitely something that we can't, you know, unravel on today's session. But it's important, if you're a creative and you want to do ads, it's important that you come up to speed with the develop. It's always changing. So the most recent development on Facebook ads, which goes onto Instagram, you definitely need to come up to speed with all of that. You need to, if possible, go on a training. You can start with YouTube videos. A lot of them are really useful and handy. I tend to do Facebook ads, particularly for my Spotify. So you could do a Facebook ad which directs or redirects people or repoints them to your Spotify, and you need to have a what's called a Facebook pixel in your Facebook Business Manager. So the pixel is a bit scientific now, but the pixel can track your people who actually land on your Spotify and click the link. So you can actually measure the performance of your Facebook ad against the cost, and then you can ask yourself, is it viable, given, of course, that Spotify only pays 0.006 pence per stream. So you do want to make it make sense. You don't want to pay £1 per stream by the time the person clicks the link. But it does work, because here's the thing about Facebook ads for Spotify and Spotify streams that ultimately, in the long run, if you're doing it consistently, pays off. With Facebook ads, well, to start with, when you put music out on Spotify, you can go onto Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, every man and his dog, tell all your family and friends. And as Angela said, you get as many streams off the back of that. They may revisit and they may play back, they may save it. But then that is our little bubble, right? They may share it as well. You know, it might go viral. 1 out of a billion songs go viral without any effort. But most songs you need to put a conscious effort into promoting. So Facebook ads, the way that it works is once you've got your Facebook Business Manager account, when you create the campaign, create the ad sets and create the ad, it points people to your Spotify. They stream the music, they follow you potentially, and they add it to playlists potentially, depending on how you create the campaign. Now, what that does on the Spotify end of things is it triggers the algorithm. So the algorithm knows that something's happening here. People are listening to this person. And if you do it well, as I said, there's a science to Facebook ads, and I can't even unpack all of that on here. I can, however, recommend some good courses because I've gone on a Facebook ad course. So if you want to know more about what courses you need to go on to, just DM me and I'll send you all the information. I have been sending it to people as well. Really useful. There's a number of different ones, but a particular one is really useful for when it comes to learning about Facebook ads. But anyway, that triggers the algorithm, and the algorithm picks it up and knows that something is happening, and it then keeps on suggesting it, adding it to the bottom of playlists or adding it to people's queue, adding it to songs that sound like you, because it's starting to pick, some activity is basically triggered, and it adds it to its algorithmic playlists as well. So there's things like Release Radar and radio. There's certain playlists that are not even editorial. They're just kind of generated by the algorithm. So the benefit of using Facebook ads for Spotify is that it gives Spotify something to work with your music. And ultimately, it opens you up to a whole new world of listeners. And the exciting part is when you're on the brink of releasing a new song and you do these ads in that kind of window. So let's say I have a new song coming out, which I do anyway, I have a new album coming out. I'm now doing my Facebook ads because that is giving a lot of activity, kind of churning the wheels, so that when the album comes out, there is already that activity happening. It's not like on the day the album is out is when I start running ads. You run ads and stuff that you probably already have. That's for somebody who's got music already. And that kind of just churns the wheels and keeps things in motion. And then when the album comes out, the algorithm would just suggest your new album to those who've been who've been listening off the back of the ads that you've created. So again, as I said, I think this whole thing of you telling the point and then me kind of adding a bit of salt to give it more flavor is really cool. So she's just talked about ads, which is very crucial. And there are so many ways. I mean, Google ads is another one. I don't even think we're going to have the time to start talking about, but let's even talk about Facebook ads, because that goes to Spotify. Very useful and very, very handy. And if you can, get yourself into some kind of training and get up to speed with how that works. But that's that on the ad side of things. The other thing I was going to talk about was the creative side of things, which essentially means, social media, using social media to the best of your ability to grow your brand and to essentially raise awareness of your project. So, and that was where Cass actually comes into the picture, because I know you talked about doing videos, doing comedy. I feel like artists are being pressured to become comedians just so that they can stay relevant on social media. I feel like in addition to just saying, hey, I have a song, you have to do stuff and be funny. And I'm naturally not a comedian, so I would struggle with that. So for the creatives out there who feel like there's this pressure on them to be present on social media as part of their marketing campaign, I don't know if you've had anyone talk to you about that concern, and equally any nuggets that you have for creators who might be struggling in that space.
I mean, I haven't had anyone. Well, to be fair, no, I have. There's a lot of people that don't like social media, but I do personally think, as someone that I have a radio show, so when artists come and send their songs, the first thing I will do is go and check their social media, because I want to see what you're doing. I want to be active. I want to see if you're on there. I want to see where are you, Angela? But
that's fine.
Yeah, I think you have to be on social media. You don't have to do what everyone else is doing on social media, and I think that's where the creativity comes in as an artist. You can do so much things on social media that isn't comedy and that isn't funny, but still going to find the people that is meant to find, because people out there, not everyone wants to be watching comedy all the time. So it's just up to the individual artist to think about what they can do that's comfortable for them, that isn't just for the likes or for the views, that isn't, compromising their integrity to get out there. And one thing that I have had artists do with me before is I've had them message me and say, and I've done it a few times, can you use one of my songs in the back of one of your videos? Or can you make a comedy sketch about my song? And I did that once, and it just so happened, it was a guy in America, to be fair. He produced and he had artists, and he said, can you use this video in the back of your song? So I did. And then there was a DJ from One Extra that heard it, and he was like, what song is that? I sent it to him, and then he put it on a playlist on One Extra off the back of that video. So different things that you can do. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be even in the spotlight. It doesn't even have to be on your page. You can absolutely. You just have to think about the creative ways that you can get your music out there in front of people. Yeah.
I had a question from Matt again, which very interesting one actually. Another question, when it comes to artists, in your experience, what has been the difference between, say, a Called Out Music, Governor B, Josh Luke Smith, etc., and other not so successful Christian artists? And this is from Matt Kane.
Very
loaded question.
Oh my days. It's a very good question. And I think if I knew the answer, like the real, answer, I would probably be a very rich man. I would make every single one of my artists, super successful. I think some artists have something, that really draws people to them, and it's that likability factor. I think that plays a huge role. I really think that does. I think on top of the music being great, on top of the music being amazing, I think there's something, that people get drawn to. I also think that there's a huge part of hard work, that, goes into the lives of these people. I mean, the two people you mentioned, Called Out Music and Governor B, I've worked with them before, and these guys are bang, 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 hard-working people. They are very clear about what they want to achieve. They are very focused on the target, on the goal. They know what works, what doesn't work. They understand their genre, the type of music they're trying to put out. Governor B has no doubt about, his sound. He's very clear about that. You can hear it from his music. Called Out as well. These guys are actually very, very focused artists. And every year in, year out, they're releasing projects. They're releasing lots and lots of music. So if you imagine the work rate that goes into releasing the number of songs that these guys release each year, that they're really hardworking. So, I mean, from my experience, obviously, I've managed several artists. I can see certain differences between some of my artists. And you can tell that there's certain traits they have, and I think I would just, for now, I'll just put it down to the work rate, and that spark, that these guys have. I think the only thing I would add, obviously, two of those artists are artists that I manage on there. And I think, and I say this on every panel that I'm on every boot camp that I do with I Am Independent, is I honestly believe if you are three things, which is excellent, first and foremost, consistent and persistent, it will pay off. And it needs, you can't just have one of those or two of those. You have, your music has to be excellent, but you do also have to be, along with that, consistent and persistent. And I think that does pay off. But I also think in terms of the question, it's interesting because of a successful artist, I'm obsessed with this whole thing of successful, because I think you have to define what success means for you. And it may really be very different. Success doesn't have to mean a #1 single. It could be, I want to be able to pay my bills from my music, or I've got an album in me that I just want to release, and that's success. So I think in terms of, I assume the thinking behind that question is, how do I become successful like them? Well, I think the advice I would give to an artist is to, first and foremost, put time into knowing who you are. All of those artists you mentioned, and just like Chibuzo said, basically, they know, they've got a distinctive sound. They know who they are. They've done the work to know who they are. They're also very strategic in how they go about things.
So you can, that's something that you can learn, to be strategic and to have a plan as well, and then to work really hard, like we've all said, but making sure that your music, you know who you are as an artist, and your music is the very best it can be, and then you've just got to keep at it. You've got to not give up. You've got to be consistent and persistent, and I do believe that it will pay off, and that success might look different, but I do believe that a form of success will come with those three things.
Definitely. I can totally echo that. Marcus, I don't know if you want to weigh in on
I was the key word that Loretta used, which I was going to use as well, was literally the consistency part. I can't stress that out enough. And again, consistency, a lot of artists say, well, you know, what is consistency? I know artists, for example, they release great songs, everybody loves it, raves about it for months, and then I don't hear from them for another 6, 7, 8, 9 months. And for me, that's not a sign of consistency, because it's a cliche saying that we live in a microwave world. You know what I'm saying? Things happen so fast, and especially as an artist, you can't afford. And I'm not saying you have to be releasing tracks like every week, every month, whatever year, right? But even if you release something, there's that constant follow-up of it, and working behind it, all that kind of stuff. So you're constantly in front of people. So you're really being very consistent in terms of what you're doing all the time, whether it's going to be releasing, your engagement, whatever it is, you're very consistent. The other thing as well that I wanted to say is there's a certain drive and a certain way of thinking that you need to have as well. So I'll use Governor B, for example. I know that Governor B wasn't just Governor B overnight. And I'm not talking about in terms of name. I'm talking about in terms of the popularity that we know of Governor B. He'll be the first to tell you that he released music and he was trying this, that, and the other before he had that one hit single, which blew him up. Do you know what I'm saying? And then from that, he learned a lot of lessons, and he's now doing all the great stuff that he's doing now. But it wasn't an overnight thing. He had to work at it hard. Like I said, find out who he was, put that effort into it. So, you know, some people you'll release your music and you think yourself, no one's playing it, you get discouraged, and then you're not on it as hard as you was before. You know what I'm saying? Someone told you 2 bad lines about they don't like your music or whatever, and then suddenly, you know, you're not on it as you were before. You need to be constantly honest. That even when you get your setbacks, you've been rejected, you're still pushing, you're still driving, you're still saying, you know what, I want to make sure that I'm doing this because this is my passion and I want to achieve it. So, you know, being very much like that. And the last thing I'll say is like I said, the mind frame as well, is I speak to a lot of artists, and the things that I tell them I think you could be doing, they don't believe in themselves. They really don't believe in themselves. And I'll use something very basic in terms of stuff that artists talk about. So everybody raves about getting on BBC One Extra, but no one wants to submit their stuff to BBC One Extra because they don't think it's going to get played. They don't think this. I'm thinking, well, if you're thinking like that already, you're already defeating yourself. I've always had a mentality, whether I'm dealing with artists or my own stuff, that you know what, I'm going to aim for the big places instantly. They tell me no, they want to know why you're telling me no, because then I can go back and work on that. And then when I come back again, I've done what you've told me to do. But I never allow myself to think small. Do you know what I'm saying? Anything that my artists tell me they want to achieve, I say, yeah, we can do that. Regardless of how long I think it will take, I say, yeah, we can do that, because I honestly believe with the hard work, reaching the right people and having that consistency, that you can achieve what you want to achieve. So again, like I said, the mind frame is that if you say to yourself, you know, this is where I want to get to, you plan properly, you set the right things in place, then you'll get there. Just don't allow yourself to think small, because you think, you know what, I'm not sure they're going to like it, and I'm not sure if they're going to play. I'm not sure if I should market it like this. No, go at it 100%. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But even when it doesn't work, you're going to learn something. Yeah, definitely. That literally sums it up really nicely, and the comments are literally exploding as well. But no, that was a really good question.
Because if you look at Governor B and Nick Brewer, who are best friends, nobody probably knows Nick Brewer as a gospel artist, but everybody knows Governor B as a gospel artist. People in the mainstream only know Governor as a Christian artist. No one would probably know that Nick Brewer is also a Christian. They're best of mates, but their audiences have been very different, and that's what I mean.
So speaking about, you know, establishing your audience from the start, your group, Green Jade, made headlines back in 2008, I think it was, when you wrote to the organizers of the Mobile Awards asking to be removed from the list of nominees, and your stance was that, you know, you were concerned that the gospel category in which you were nominated could interfere with the work that you were doing with young people of different religious backgrounds and social backgrounds. So coming to the theme of today's discussion, which is blurring the lines, based on the decision that you guys made back then, do you think that being a gospel or Christian artist could interfere with being relevant to society, given the fact that you obviously pulled out because you were associated with a gospel genre?
I think at the time it absolutely did. I think that things like that have changed that conversation. And I think we're in a different place now than we were back in 2008. When that happened, we, as I said, as you quite rightly said, we were currently doing our anti-gun crime school stuff, and we just done Tower Hamlets, where the majority of the schools were mainly Muslim. And we were concerned that the schools would have a negative reaction, because you got to understand, specifically with schools, they have this thing where they need to be showed to be balanced. So if we bring in a Christian group, then we need to bring in a Muslim group. Then we need to bring in a Jewish group. Then we need to bring in a Hindu group. So what they tend to do is, we ain't going to bring in any of you because too much. We can't do that. And that, unfortunately, in the setting specifically of schools, not necessarily everywhere, but definitely with schools, we knew that to be the case. So we were always very careful about the Christian faith side of it, because we wanted to make sure that people understood the message that we had was about restoration, it was about anti-gun crime, and it wasn't about evangelism. Even though that message of restoration is about God's grace and healing. We were trying to be subtle in understanding the realms where we were. Unfortunately, what happened was that got picked up in a newspaper, it got blown up, and exactly the thing that we didn't want to happen happened. Schools got wind of it and pulled out of it.
Oh dear.
So we went from being booked 6 months in advance to losing all of those bookings and having to change the name of Guns Down to Fighting Chance to get back bookings, because schools started to go, yeah, well, we know that this is your faith-based group and we're a bit concerned about this. And that was the concern. Not because we have a problem with our faith, but we know that the environment that we're in, that we need to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves.
And I think on that premise as well, when we say we're Christian artists, or like Chance the Rapper, it's not Chance the Rapper, what's the other guy? Lecrae. We say we're rappers who are Christians. Some people are actually doing that tactically because they want to try and avoid these kind of scenarios where they get, you know, sidelined because of their faith. And, you know, in line with the topic of today, do we think that for certain opportunities, you know, this was a clear example of, you know, wanting to go and minister and reach out, and obviously it kind of had it backfired effectively when they knew you were faith-based, but for certain other opportunities that may present themselves, do you guys, having been in the industry for decades across the three of you, do you think that when it comes to light that you are Christians or that you have a faith-based message, that sometimes you could get sidelined for opportunities? Because that could be a reason for artists to want to blur the lines and not be very transparent about who they are and what they stand for.
Yeah, I mean, I think 100% that's the case. I mean, you take Wiz's example, just there, in today's society, he's got a massive lawsuit on he could bring a massive lawsuit for discrimination because there was nothing in their content that was Christian. They've been told they can't work because they are Christians. But in 2008, that wasn't a thing the way it is now. You see what I mean? So it's very obvious that being a Christian, I mean, even in my line of work in the music industry, believe it or not, even though everybody is pretty much unified, knowing that people from the church, etc., are the best musicians and stuff, that also has a stigma attached, whereby it's like, he's one of those church guys, yada, yada, yada. So I've spent a lot of my time not denouncing anything, but I guess not necessarily being, like, in my life anyway, I don't lead with I'm a Christian. My life, I guess, is how it's meant to be. Like, if you talk to me, you'll find out very quickly that I am, but it bears no relevance in my day-to-day life in that way.
just like any other job. And I've seen it. I'm sure I've been affected by it. That whole kind of church musician stigma. So it literally happens in all walks of life. So I totally understand why some people would want to do that. But also, I think it's because there's a flip side to this, where the church hasn't been very accepting of things that they don't deem to be Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So then
somebody is actually asking a question along those lines. You carry on. I was just going to say.
Yeah. So it's like the church frowns on things that it doesn't deem to be Christian. So then you find yourself trying not to be Christian because you feel rejected by your own people. And I don't mean Christian in lifestyle, but being overtly Christian in your delivery, which is why I made a point of saying about Triple earlier, that he's very unapologetically a Christian rapper, because he's like, our music's for the church. Most people were not saying that. You know what I mean? I think you'll find as soon as you come out of the worship music arena, that's when this topic becomes very prevalent. And then the worship music arena is a very interesting one by itself. I mean, if I was to poke the bear a little bit about the worship, because it's like, how are we worshiping these days as people? If we take Wiz's definition of gospel and Christian, how are we worshiping as Black people with an African, Caribbean, whatever background? All of a sudden we don't connect with that music anymore if we're in church. And I feel that's got a lot to do with what we're talking about now. So there's the mainstream line, but then there's also the line when you bring it inside Christendom, and it's all the same thing. Everybody's running away from not being accepted or trying to get ahead. And it begs the question, how many people are really being true to themselves?
Yeah, this is it. You have to be authentic. Literally, you have to do what is authentic to yourself. And Tammy T's asked a question which you've partly answered, but I wanted to get maybe Triple to weigh in on this. He says, would it be fair to say that those called to do music that's probably for an audience mainly out of the church have less support from the church community? I have a view, but I'd like to get what Triple has to say on this.
The long and short answer of it is yes. Unfortunately, individuals who are of a faith-based in terms of what they believe, when it comes to their art form and the way that they express themselves, if it's not overtly Christian, if it's not like, oh yes, Jesus, 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 a lot of the more traditional church folk will raise an eyebrow and be like, what's this? I don't know. We can't. This is not. There's not enough, Jesus overt Christian message in this. We're not going to push it to our congregation or our church or in our youth groups and whatnot. Then you end up ostracizing those artists, because a lot of the time those kind of artists are going to find it very difficult because they're not being accepted by those who are supposed to love and accept them and support them and encourage them. And they're going into new territories, they're going into new grounds, and they're maybe not straight away be loved and accepted by those in that field as well. So it's like they're stuck in this middle ground. In saying that, one thing I have learned of recent, and this is something I now stand by, whether you're Christianized or not, whether you make Christian music or not, just make music of excellence. Where the production, the lyrics, the content, the mixing, the mastering, where that is top notch, the songwriting top notch. Because I, honestly speaking, till today, Shackle still gets played in the clubs.
Till tomorrow.
Kanye West did a whole Jesus is King album, and people were I was on rotation. That was overtly Christian music. But yes, it's different because a lot of these individuals have a platform and a status. But the reality is, okay, let's come back down. We look at someone like Happy, who's been absolutely doing some amazing stuff in that kind of Afro gospel kind of, not gospel, but Afro kind of music scene. And there's some very overt Christian messages in the music, but because it's good music, it's being played on Capital Extra, it's being played on Radio 1. So the moral of the story is, if it's good music, it will get played.
But kind of taking it back to the story of them in the freezing cold in the grotty setting, it does kind of paint the picture of the reality of being an independent artist, because they're passionate. I mean, they could have done anything, but they went that way because they're passionate about creating music, about the message that they have to share. And I know someone like JC, Becca, and the artists that you guys work with would be, you know, working day and night, you know, just kind of doing the hard work to get the music out, to get the message out. So I think probably it would be worth also exploring with you guys the reality of the hurdles and the hustles. You know, for example, JC, you sold out several events, but I can imagine that you had to do a lot of work to speak to people, to, I don't know, probably not social media, because you're probably not selling them on social media. Whatever it is that you had to do, I think people will be looking to learn, because one of the things that I've found from these sessions is that there are people who are genuinely hungry to do well and to thrive as independent artists, but there aren't that many sources of knowledge and information. So hearing your story, learning from your personal journey, I think would do a load of good for some people who are watching. So probably worth just kind of giving a bit of insight into the realities of the work that comes with being an independent artist, whether you want to talk about promotion, about branding, about creating music, writing, recording, whatever it is that, you know, is the reality of the work. You want to give us an example, would be useful as well for somebody who's looking and going, I want to be an indie artist, but I haven't got a clue how to be prepared. How do I get myself prepared for this journey?
Well, I'm going to say this, and it might be quite controversial, but indie artists need to start looking at or thinking like business people.
Yep.
Because with a business, there is marketing, there is branding, there is a message that you give. You know, I'm going to use the good old Nike where it says, just do it. Everybody knows, just do it. Everybody remembers the Coca-Cola Santa Claus in at the Christmas, you know, their Christmas adverts, John Lewis's Christmas adverts, and all of those little things help. As an independent artist, it is so important to, one, understand who you are, but I get that along the way you're not always going to be able to do that. So try different things and try and figure out what works for you. But the biggest thing you have to do is know your audience and understand who your audience is. They have to know, like, and trust you. And that is with any business. That's with any business. They have to know, like, and trust you. And if they don't know, like, and trust you, they're not going to be bought into you like that. And so you have to, as musicians now, as creatives, we now have to start understanding the pain point of the people that we are producing this music to. And so a lot of the reasons why I haven't released music is not, one, because I don't want to, it's because I want to be in a position where when I do release music, it's not out of because I have to release music, but it's out of, actually, I've listened to my audience. I kind of know what they want. I kind of know what they're listening to. And so therefore I can create music in a way that, one, benefits me and music that I love, but one, and also music that I know that my audience will gravitate towards. I remember saying this to you, Sarah, that I have a bigger email. I have an email list of the size of over 6,000 people, and I have more people on my mailing list than I do followers. And so a lot of my grafting has been, jump on my mailing list, Let's build a relationship there. Let's build a relationship offline. And a lot of that grafting comes from doing free masterclasses like this on YouTube, or, you know, having Zoom calls. You just have to learn how to carve out, especially what Andy said, you have to learn to carve yourself out. So if you know that you are someone who is who loves love songs and who loves to talk about the love of God, then trust me, people who need that will gravitate towards that. People who need to understand the grace of God will gravitate towards that. And like everybody said, everybody has a message. And I think until we tap into the message that we were born to give on this earth, we will understand the kind of music and the kind of content that we are going to create. So for me, a lot of the work and the hard work has been, well, I don't want this to fall on deaf ears. So it means that knowing that social media only show 5% of your posts, only show your post to 5% of your followers. Why would I do that when I know that I can get a 40% to 50% rate of my open email rate? And knowing that they've opened it and read it and clicked on, that's more beneficial for me to work on than for me growing an Instagram of 100,000 and I can't even sell 10,000. I can't even sell 1,000 tickets. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
So until we start thinking as business people, which is where I need us to get to, then I think for indie artists it will become a lot easier for us. So yeah.
That's a really good one. So as you're preparing to jump into the ocean of being an indie artist, have your business head or business hat on. I love that.
Yeah,
absolutely. Who wants to go next?
Well, I just wanted to jump. Oh, sorry, Becca. Yeah, you go for it.
There you go, Becca. Let's go. Let's hear you, Becca. We haven't heard you in a few minutes.
All I was gonna say is it's just so interesting that when you asked the question, Sarah, you said, you know, what are some of the things you'd give advice about regarding being an indie artist? And I think a lot of people, not a lot, but some people get into this not wanting to be indie artists. They expect that a team just comes along or them and a couple mates can just bang it out and do it. And so it's very interesting that you were super, super clear on what are some tidbits you'd give on being an indie artist. Where, like JC said, there's a lot of this that you have to do on your own and you have to learn and adapt to, and you know, stuff like that. So it wasn't anything long, it's just that. So it's very key that people listen into these podcasts. Our experience lies in being independent, not in being signed with huge teams and machine with loads of financial backing. So it's very important that everyone just makes the differentiation between the two.
Absolutely. And I remember when I started out, I was asking one of my mentors, and obviously I was as ignorant as they come. Yeah. So I was asking my mentor, so who's going to manage me? And she's like, well, nobody knows you. You're not going to get managed. Like, you don't have a following, you know, it's like, you don't have anything. What do you mean who's going to manage you? And I was like, really? She's like, yeah, you need to have a following. And when she so she gave me that literally baptism of fire. But the minute she said that, I got the memo straight away. I'm like, oh, is that what it is? Okay, then off I go, you know. But it's like, the reality is there is so much that needs to be done. And most of it starts with us. I'm naturally an introvert. If you go on my Instagram, you see my bio literally says that naturally I would want to just sit in the corner, read a book. On Sunday, for example, when Italy equalized, I went to bed. I didn't watch the rest of the match. That's me. I literally was like, nah, I can't handle this. I went to bed. So I'm that person who normally, and that's probably why I tend to work a lot, because that's me in my space. Like when I'm just by myself, I just work and then I sleep. You know, that's who I am. But the point being, I wouldn't have been on social media if I didn't do music. That's the reality. So when it dawned on me that if I do not speak about my music myself, no one else will, because guess what? No one else knows my music but me, because I'm new, you know. So I had to then come out of my shell and be like, oh, in case you didn't know, I actually sing. Oh, and by the way, I have literally, and that was how I started coming out and being like, you know, being my own marketing person and promoter and learning new skills and observing and watching. Sometimes I sit and watch X Factor, not because I care, but because I just want to see what Simon is saying and I'm taking notes. Sometimes I'm watching ads and I'm going, oh, what did they do there? And I'm taking notes. The subliminal messages that are being put in certain things, I'm like, how can I? Literally, I'm learning marketing from observing marketers and observing things that other people are doing and because again, I don't have a marketer. I'm building my different skill sets that I need in different areas. Equally with branding, I know the day is coming when I'm going to share my first ever single artwork, and you're all going to fall down laughing, because when literally one day I'm going to share it on social media. I was stood by a wall like this. This is ignorant me coming in. I looked at it the other day and I favorited it on my phone so that I can get it easily when I decide to share it. But they then blurred out the background. It was the cheesiest thing you'll ever see, right? But I thank God for people in my life who are like, Sarah, no, this isn't going up. Look at the song you've done. Look at the artwork. And that goes to branding. So now I'm thinking, I didn't realize. And you're beginning to learn, so there's such a thing as branding. It's not enough to have a song. It's not enough to know you can sing. How do you look compared to the song? And then as an indie artist, you're starting to say, okay, so I do my marketing, I have to think of branding, you know, and then you start carving out different lanes. all by yourself. But then, as it was said on the artist manager episode, I think it was episode 7, it gets to a point where you then need to start getting people into your space. It got to a point where I started making a list of all the things that I do myself and thinking, what can I pass on to somebody else? Because the list is growing long. And there are certain things I hold on to really tight that I don't even want to delegate. But there's certain things I can be like, yeah, I can pass this on to somebody. But you need to know all the things that need to be done so that if it's being missed, you know it's missed. But if you don't know what needs to be done, if someone says they're doing it, but they're not, you wouldn't even know. You would be none the wiser. So that's why it's very important as independent artists to, as much as possible, try and learn every aspect of the art. Even if you're signed, try and put your head and ask questions. Try and know what's going on where you're probably not even supposed to be involved. Because if you get dropped tomorrow, how would you pick up? And that's one of the reasons why in the mainstream, when people get dropped from labels, they're completely shattered because they haven't got a clue where to pick themselves up.